Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Africa in Focus with myself, Kwame, Ghanaian writer, journalist, broadcaster, podcaster, and entrepreneur. And this week's edition of Africa in Focus, Trump and pharmaceuticals and pregnancy. So this is the theme for this week's show, Trump, pharmaceuticals and pregnancy. This in the light of Donald Trump last Monday, given a speech linking paracetamol to autism. So before we get into the show, if you like what you hear, please share with your friends, your family, your social media networks. Subscribe to Ghana Africa in Focus on YouTube. Also subscribe to Ghana Africa in Focus on Spotify. Look out for Ghana Africa in Focus on Spotify. Click the notification bell. And that means Spotify will notify you every time we upload a new podcast. And we're also featured on the top 80 podcasts in Ghana. So this is a compilation being compiled by a company called FeedSpot, who collect data on the popular podcasts in Ghana. And we're actually in the top 20 of the best podcasts in Ghana. So thank you for all of you who have made Ghana Africa in Focus one of the most popular podcasts in Ghana. So apart from those two podcasts I've just mentioned, you can also access this on FeedSpot. So just look out for FeedSpot podcast and then type in Ghana African Focus Investor Children. You can get us there. All right, so let's get into the podcast today, looking about Trump, paracetamol, and pregnancy. So Donald Trump caused a huge, cry last week Monday when he made a speech that advised pregnant women not to use Tylenol, which is known as paracetamol outside of America, saying that it's no good and that pregnant women should fight like hell to only take it in case of extreme fever. So obviously this has sparked huge controversy within the pharmaceutical industry, and that medical experts have strongly pushed back on the claims, with some calling the president's comments dangerous. Now, also in the UK, health officials have stressed that paracetamol remains the safest painkiller available to pregnant women. Now, for me, there's a couple of things on this. Pharmaceuticals and Black people, and also the nature of the pharmaceutical industry. Yeah. And so when we look at what Trump is saying, Trump didn't say of his own fruition. He has a health secretary who has advisors. So they would have got some, I'm just saying this because, he wouldn't say off the cuff. And he says a lot of things, but, you don't say something like that without getting proof from your advisors and their advisors and their advisors, some of whom are scientists. So for me, this brings up two things into question. Now, I'm going to go down the line of pharmaceuticals and Black people, particularly, yeah? Because pharmaceuticals do not necessarily align with Black people and their DNA. Now, as a people, if you look at history, up until about 100 years ago, if that, we never used pharmaceuticals, particularly, especially in places like America and the Caribbean and even the motherland continent, where we use natural medicinal herbs to heal ourselves. In actual fact, the actual father of medicine, not Hippocrates, right, is actually an African called Imhotep. And in one of his treatises called the Ebers Papers, that was discovered, quote unquote, by Ebers. That's why it's called the Ebers Papers, but it actually should be called Imhotep Papers, Imhotep. He had a cure using herbal treatments for more than 200 ailments. from hypertension to diabetes to blood pressure to glaucoma. Yeah. So it tells that before the advent of Western medicine, yeah, African people globally were using medicinal plants to heal themselves. Yeah. So, that shows you that historically, right, we've never used pharmaceuticals up until recently, and that for all this time that we've been on the planet, which is thousands, millions, and even trillions of years, we've used medicinal plants, yeah, to treat ourselves from various ailments that would beset us. So today, because of miseducation from our part, misinformation as well, and not knowing our true culture as Black people, African people, we are now taking pharmaceutical drugs to cure ourselves. So whether we have hypertension, whether we have diabetes, whether we have kidney issues, whether we got, if we got a cold, etc., we are always using pills, yeah, as opposed to medicinal plants. Now, I'm not necessarily linking what Trump said, paracetamol to autism, but what I will say is that, for example, in the UK, Black women are 5 times likely to die, yeah, during or after childbirth. Why is that the case? So if they are giving our women all these pharmaceutical drugs, yeah, and we know that when you take a pharmaceutical drug, it has a side effect, which is why you get the pain, yeah, which is why you take things like, Tylenol or paracetamol to help ease the pain. So what are they giving our women to make them 5 times likely to die during pregnancy, after pregnancy? Is it the potency of the pharmaceutical drugs that is, having a you could say, negative effect on the DNA of our women? Is it the fact that, like I said at the beginning, that pharmaceutical drugs do not align with the African body because we have high melanin, high grade melanin, and pharmaceutical drugs don't necessarily sit well with melanin, yeah, or melanocytes, which is what produces melatonin, that produces the pigmentation that we got called melanin. Didn't sit well with that. Because another example, cocaine is a highly addictive substance, yeah? But with Black people, because of our melanin, yeah, cocaine is even makes it more addictive. That's why when Black people start taking cocaine, they get hooked on it more than any other group of people, yeah? Because cocaine and our melanin do not meet, do not align. And so what I'm saying is this: as a people, we need to be really, really circumspect on taking pharmaceutical drugs, because at the end of the day, it's a global, multi-billion-dollar industry. Yeah. So the people out there, who may not have our best intention at heart, will give us these pharmaceutical drugs, knowing possibly that they may kill us, or least case scenario, have some very, very bad side effects that could cause pain. That will make you again take more pharmaceuticals in terms of painkillers. Yeah. So if that was not the case, and like I said, I want you to critically analyze, make a critical analysis of this issue. Why is it in the UK that Black women are 5 times likely to die either during birth or after birth? Yeah. And given, as far as I'm aware, the same drugs as Caucasian, South Asian, Chinese, and Arab women. So what is it about the drugs? Because there must be a link between the drugs and the fact that Black women are dying giving birth. There must be a link somewhere. Because it doesn't happen to the other women of different races in the numbers that it does. And added to that, infant mortality is also a problem in America and also on the African continent. And we all take the same pharmaceutical drugs. So there has to be a link between some of these pharmaceutical drugs and now women dying during or after birth. Yeah. So I want us to to ponder about that. I want us to consider that. I want us to make a critical analysis, critical thinking of that viewpoint that pharmaceutical drugs do not align with our bodies and are responsible for a lot of side effects, including pain, and also, a lot of imbalances that happen within our bodies. Now, second issue as to why Trump has said this is that obviously there's an ongoing battle, yeah, between the pharmaceutical companies and this particular administration, because Trump has put as Secretary of Health Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is anti-vax, and to a certain degree, he's also anti-pharmaceutical companies, because he has done a lot of work, rightly or wrongly, he's done a lot of work that links vaccines and pharmaceutical drugs to ailments like autism. Now, I'm not saying what he's saying is true. Don't say that I'm saying that. What I'm saying is that he has done a lot of research in the last 10, 15, 20 years that states, yeah, that there may be links between vaccines, yeah, pharmaceutical drugs, and issues like autism and other ailments. So that goes totally against the grain of the pharmaceutical companies, which I can say is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so, this is why, medical experts in America and the UK and others have disputed the claims by Trump and also by RFK, stating that there's a link between, paracetamol and autism. But ask yourself this, particularly in the UK, if you live in the UK, 20 years ago or before 2000, there were not many cases of autism in the UK. Now, autism is at record levels in the UK in children. So what is that? What's all that about? Is it the environment in the UK? Or, as I suspect, some pharmaceutical drugs that are given to pregnant women? Because when women are pregnant, they're given drugs, and we don't know the nature of the drugs. We don't know what the nature of these drugs are, what they're made of, the component of them, and particularly the potency of those drugs, which, like I said, has a more negative effect on Black women than other women, which is why, in particular, I'm concerned about this issue whereby in the UK, Black women are 5 times likely to die giving birth. And we have the same problem all over the Black world, whether in the US, on the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean, the same things happening. And do you think it's a coincidence? Do you really believe it's a coincidence? I want you to think. I'm putting it out there. Do you think it's a coincidence that there's high mortality of our women globally, in UK, in North America, in the Caribbean, Africa? You think it's a coincidence? So what Trump said, there may be a shred of truth in that, but like I said, the whole thing for me is about this whole debate about pharmaceuticals as opposed to medicinal plants. So we know that these pharmaceutical drugs have side effects, whether it's a paracetamol, whether it's nubrafenol, whether it's glucosamol, whether it's morphine, whatever. All these pharmaceutical drugs have side effects. But natural drugs, and this is where the dichotomy is, because in the Western media and Western societies, they don't believe in medicinal plants. The Chinese do, indigenous, communities around the world, Amazonians, indigenous groups in Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, they believe in traditional medicine. The Chinese, they have their own traditional medicine. If you live in the UK or US or Europe, right, you will see a lot of Chinese medicine shops, up and down the place, because they believe in their own indigenous Chinese medicine, which incidentally had its root in Africa. But that's for another time. So the Chinese people understand the power of medicinal plants, yeah, for every ailment, whether it's diabetes, hypertension, cancers, what have you. They understand the power of their own medicinal herbs. But what about we as African people, Black people globally? Do we understand the power of medicinal medicine? Do we understand that that's more better for our DNA and more aligns with our melanin than pharmaceuticals? Or do we understand that? Do we understand that? Are we aware of that? Because like I said, before the advent of Western medicine, we were using medicinal plants for trillions of years. And we never had any issues. We never had any, massive health problems the way we are now. So, we need to make a distinction now between what is in our best interest. And for me, in wrapping up and closing up, Trump he may be an idiot, but he's not a fool. So there may be a shred of truth in what he has said between the link in this example between paracetamol and autism. But my whole thing is wrapped up in the fact that Black women in the UK, as a case study, are 5 times likely to die during or after birth, meaning that there's a linkage somewhere between those pharmaceutical drugs that our women are being given when they're pregnant, during pregnancy, and the outcome of that. Some of our women are dying. And then some are traumatized to the fact that they don't want any more children after that first experience. And 2, I'm suggesting that we need to find alternatives. We can't rely on a system, of Western pharmaceuticals and Western drugs that has not been in our best interest, and that essentially kills us. Because don't forget, there's a book called Medical Apartheid. If you don't believe what I'm saying is true, History of Western Medicine, go and read a book called Medical Apartheid, and you would understand that despite the fact that we live in a global world and that we all the same and what have you, right? It's not the case, because medical apartheid would tell you of how systemically the inequalities that we see in the healthcare system, not just in Britain, but in the whole Western world, has historical precedence. Yeah? And so for me, the solution to, for example, our women dying giving birth, right, should be to give a natural way. And we need to do research ourselves as Africans into what medicinal plants are best to give our women while they're pregnant and during their pregnancy and after their pregnancy. Yeah? Because like I said, in your grandmother's time, in your great-grandmother's time, she was a woman, she got pregnant, she never used pharmaceuticals, she used medicinal plants. Because medicinal plants aligns with our DNA and have no side effects, contrary to what you may hear, in Western media, who often, because of their own ignorance as opposed to medicinal health or medicinal plants, they say that there's no so-called scientific evidence that claim that medicinal plants are actually good and that they have the capacity to cure numerous ailments. So I'm going to leave it there for now for you to make up your own mind and for you to make up your own research. Is Trump wrong or does he have a point? All right, so if you like what you hear, please share to your friends, your family, social media networks. Subscribe to Ghana African Focus on YouTube. Subscribe to Ghana African Focus on Spotify. And like I said, you can also get us on the FeedSpot portal, and who have compiled a list of the most popular podcasts in Ghana. Ghana African Focus is in the top 20 of that list. So we thank you, all the listeners, particularly in Ghana, who have made Ghana African Focus one of the most popular and talked about podcasts in Ghana. And so thank you for listening. So for myself, Kwame, and from all the crew here on Ghana Africa in Focus, thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you in the next edition of Ghana Africa in Focus.